Welcome back to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Holmes, and member of the Black Doctoral Network. Well, today we have again one of our own, one of our elite, one of our experts. And this person that I'm sharing with you today is Dr. Renee Cromer. She is one of the co-founders of OD Docs Inc., a global organizational development consulting firm who assesses, analyzes, and maximizes the health. You hear me, people? The health of organizations to optimize workplace culture and organizational resiliency. She's also the founder and owner of Amplified Strengths Learning and Development. There, she offers coaching for leaders and executives, high-performing teams, and people looking to reach their full potential. Strengthen that muscle. She's a Gallup-certified Clifton Strengths Coach. She has been a higher education executive and leader for more than 20 years as a student affairs professional, and now she's working as a faculty member. As a result, she frequently collaborates with colleges, school districts, and nonprofit organizations to empower leaders to use an assess-based approach to student engagement. She's going to drop some stuff on y'all today, and guess what? You're going to get it all for free. Welcome, Dr. Cromer.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher Holmes. Thank you for having me.
So excited to share all of you with all of these people. So let's go back about 5 years. And I want you to share, who was this young, tender Dr. Renee Cromer? Who were you as a young filly?
Just 5 years?
Just five. That's it.
Okay, so 5 years, I would say I had just hit the fourth floor, right? So the woman never tells her full age, but I was in the beginnings of considering doing my doctorate. But at that point, I had been in higher ed and really I'd been in higher ed for probably about 20 years at that point, and really just struggling with the limitations of what we could and could not do for Black students on the traditional university campus in California or in the CSUs. You know, equity means something different because anytime you try to do something for Black students, it's like, hold on now, if you do it for them, you have to do it for everyone else. And it's just, well, that's why we're trying to address equity, right? So I was just really frustrated with the constant pushback or the funding not being there for that, when clearly graduation and retention rates for Black students is always, not where it needs to be. And that's not our fault. They need particular services and things that are tailored to them, particularly people that look like them on these campuses. So anyway, I felt like, okay, it's time to roll your sleeves up and get in the game and see what it is I could do to basically impact change from a different standpoint. And so I decided that was going to be from the faculty side, because there's some autonomy there and you get to kind of move freely, and you could be a freedom rider and nobody would even know, just as long as you have your office hours. So I literally was in a meeting with a bunch of community members, and it was around, services for Black students and how they're just not missing the mark, or how they're missing the mark. And I had a faculty member, it was a white male, who basically alluded to, like, how are you even qualified to be on this committee when you don't have alphabet soup behind your name, right? And so I was like, bet. And particularly being a first generation college student, really the first person in my family to graduate from college, now the third time, I really just see education as a tool. So, or, like almost like a VIP pass. So when it's time to come into the threshold of access, then they say, well, you need this to be in this room or in this space. Literally, you just go to your toolbox and go, give me one of these. So to me, it was clear it was time to go upgrade and go get that alphabet soup behind my name so that I could be in any of those rooms and no one could tell me, I couldn't be there.
And see, it's amazing because when you are working in student affairs, that's a totally different experience than being a faculty member,
right.
Because you get to see what services are or are not available to those students. And you see how they struggle when they come to you and they're like, we need support, we need help, I'm having issues here. And you're like, okay, well, let me reach out, let me see what I can do, versus being in the space to do it right there, real time.
Right. And they never ask the students. I mean, in academia, God bless us, we're so good about, prescribing these programs and services, but nobody really asks the students, like, what do y'all want? And then your feelings are hurt when they don't show up or they're not engaged, but you have to invite them to the table and make sure that they're a part of that build. So I felt like I could do that better as faculty. Terrified, like I never in a million years thought I could do a doctorate. That just was not in my wheelhouse. Especially, coming up as a kid in college saved my life. It got me out of the environment that I was in. And so to go back and do a three-peat for the third time, I just felt like I did when I showed up on a college campus as an undergrad. I was like, everybody knows something I don't. Like, what is a Scantron?
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
I just, you just feel like you're really, you just feel like you're so green. And then to be able to navigate that space and know that, you're going to have to find some allies. So wanting to go into it for me, but also to know that I could then become an ally in a different way and be able to show up in some space and get access to some things just because somebody has called me doctor.
Yeah. So when you graduated high school, you went to college, what was your initial plan?
I fled because I'm from this part in I'm in California called Fresno, and I'll leave it at that. And I was like, I'm leaving college. I'm never coming back. And so I actually chose the widest PWI in the CSU system. I swear the talented 10th was revisited when I was there. There was like 10 of us. It's less than 1% enrollment for Black students. And it was traumatizing.
Wow.
But defining at the same time. And so that's where I really just kind of came into my own in terms of being an advocate for myself, and just persistence. And we call it all kinds of things now, grit, whatever, but it's just persistence and resilience, which I feel like are one of many of our superpowers as people, because it's not a matter of if, it's when, and we're always problem solving. You can call it what you want, but we're resilient and we know how to show up and in the face of opposition and like strife. So it was a quarter system. It was an engineering school. I was a psych major. I just felt like one of us is not like the others, but luckily the 3 Black staff and faculty that were on the campus took a liking to me and the other 10 students and just took us in. So they were like our guides. Yeah. And so as a result, mentored us. Then we wanted to go back and give the way that they had, because they were really our lifeline. When you go to class and you're looking for an engineering class and the teacher asks you if you're lost, it's just that sense of belonging. It wasn't something, it was a luxury that you just weren't afforded. You were always the only one in your class. And you just didn't feel like people wanted you there.
So I can definitely see how that experience followed you as you became now working on campuses and student affairs, because you didn't want any other students to feel what you felt when you started undergrad.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So then you go and you get your master's. And then at some point you said, I'm going to get this doctorate too. So I want to talk now, because we know you already have it. Let's talk about.
Okay, hold on. Let me tell you this part. Okay, I feel like people need to hear this part because you said you go on and get your master's, but when I tell you, it's always strife, right? Because there's these boxes. So even getting a master's, even getting for every denial letter in every pursuit of my degrees, there was always a rejection. Always. Wow. Just how it goes. Like undergrad, they were like, nope, sorry. I was like, okay, bet, dear baby Jesus, like, let's go. Like, I know this is what I'm supposed to do. So I literally have a denial letter for my undergrad with the acceptance behind it. I have a denial letter, right, for the master's level, because I think undergrads think it's all about the GPA. You have to fit, back then we were doing the GRE and all that gatekeeping deters them. But my GPA was really low coming out of my undergrad because I was a first-year college student. I was like, this graduation thing is not going to happen, but it did. So then I had the nerve to go get a master's. That was a no. They were like, no, you're undergrad. I think I came out of undergrad with like a 2.5, but I was on a quarter system at an engineering school. Like, huh? So same thing. God put a Black female who happened to be the executive director of NASPA at the time in my path, who basically took me in and made me a fellow at NASPA and was like, oh, absolutely not. Like, it's like No Child Left Behind when it comes to us sometimes, right? So she snatched me up and she wrote that school a letter and was like, absolutely not. So then I have a acceptance letter to go with that denial letter. So I was prepared for the doctoral level to be the same thing. Like, this is going to be a grind. If I hear yes first, I feel like uneasy because that's not what I'm used to or what it's been. So I was getting ready. I was rolling my sleeves up, like, let's go admissions. Do you need a blood sample? Like, what are we doing? So So I actually was charted to do an EDD because at the time I was working at a, as a CSU campus, but then I had a mentor who pulled me out of line at the EDD line to turn in my application and was like, hey, so you've done this work around, like workplace culture or employees being, happy on this campus and people understanding themselves better through assessments rooted in positive psychology, like strengths. And did some onboarding with that. They're like, did you know that's like a whole major and like a whole leg of psychology? So she pulled me out of line and I went and decided to do a PsyD instead in organizational development, which was probably a God thing too. Well,
Yeah.
always. But that part was, I didn't get the opposition initially because it was a conversation and an application, yes, but again, nobody looked like me, so it was like, we just running this like we did however many years ago. But you learn after you accomplish each stage that you can do it, but you still have to. It's a big job keeping that imposter syndrome and keeping the mental right, so you can just show up, let alone do the work.
Yeah. And let's remind the people that, between your master's and starting your doctorate, you worked for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then deciding, you just shared a little bit about that, about being challenged, about getting that alphabet soup. And you was like, okay, 8 years in, let's go do it.
Yeah.
Game on. And then you start the program.
And then I start the program. So same feeling I had when I was 18, sitting in a seat at a PWI as an undergrad, like looking around like I do not belong here, or just kind of feeling uneasy, and really like post-traumatic like degree disorder in a sense, like triggered because my professors didn't look like me, right? Are they here because they want to see me succeed? Like, what can I expect? Just anxious of not knowing what this was going to be. Was it going to be a roller coaster? Was it different because I'm in a different space, a different degree? But it actually, it was a different type of program and very intimate in terms of like the cohort. But I had more people of color as students in this cohort with me, which was like the psychological safety I needed.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see that reflected in the instructors per se, but I had like people, other Black women side by side. And it was nice because you look to the right and you look to the left and it's like, okay, there's power in numbers. Like we're going to struggle, but we're going to struggle together. And at some point it became about that, right? Like, just we had a responsibility to one another, because it's about being able to pay it forward and then, go back and help those who are coming. That's just who we are as a people. So, it was a much better experience in terms of having other people look like me in my program because I never had that. But the rigor of the program, again, like, being a first-gen college student, I always felt like I'd rather do jail time than write. Right? Like, no, just where's my jumpsuit? Because writing was never something that was reinforced as something that I did well. There was always spoken to a lack, right? Because of the people, the instructors, the educators that I was surrounded by. So I came in feeling like I had a writing deficit, or I felt like I wasn't prepared or ready for this. So it was like this secret that I was like, I hope nobody finds out. But then realizing, like, coming in with 8 years of experience and that matters. Like when you're an adult learner, right? Like I was probably more focused too than in my undergrad, but it was like an assignment. I felt like I was on special assignment to go in and be about it so that I could come out and do this work.
Yeah. And I think there's a power in that because you weren't coming in to the doctorate program to do a new type of work. You were coming out to be deeper in the work that you were already doing, just at a higher level. You talked about the writing. One of the things that many people don't understand is the level of academic writing that has to happen in a PhD program specifically. And not only the writing, but when you're reading, it's like, okay, wait a minute. I just read this 10 times and I still don't know what I just read.
Listen, my prescription changed every 2 months in my doc program because the reading, the computer, APA format had the nerve to update while I was in it. Like we had to
Yes.
learn a whole new 7th edition, and I'm already like, AP what? And I didn't even understand why it mattered. Like, who cares about the margins? And you know what I was trying to say in that citation? But there was all these nuances that could really deter someone to just say, I'm good, right? Which a lot
Yeah.
of people do. But the reading and the reading comprehension, but also it was the first time I experienced, like, somebody wanted to know what I thought though about what I read and putting it into practice. Because it's the degree that I have is a very much a practitioner's degree. So we would do things that applied to the work, which was helpful to be able to make that connection and then develop my own view. But it's daunting. Books, they keep coming, right? And then the cost. That was the other thing. It's like a lot of people don't want to go into debt, but it's like, you know what? There's no repo man for degrees. Once you have it, it's yours, and you've spent money on less, right? But it's an investment. And even now, like I just finished in June and I'm still kind of like, somebody owes me something. Like, where's my trip to Tahiti? Or like somebody owes me something. But at the end of the day, it's like you're on special assignment. And so you don't know how you're going to be used and how you're going to have to step in spaces and bridge gaps. And, you know, when you show up and you can speak to the knowledge that you have to educate people so that they can even, you know, recognize where maybe they're not serving students, or they're not, organizations aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, but being able to be an expert and recognizes that and be a person of color, you just never know who's watching.
Yeah,
you just don't.
Absolutely right. I'm going to steal that quote, by the way.
The repo man.
I know it's intellectual property, but I'm letting you know now, there is not a repo man on your degree. Once it's yours, it is yours.
They cannot take it away from you. They cannot.
I love that. So, and I know for me, when I was in the program, the coursework was not the most enjoyable.
Yeah.
But when I got to the part of doing my own research, it's where I really came alive, because it was now my work.
Right.
And it was just like, let's go. And I'm excited about finishing this and getting this information out there, because I know it is great work and somebody needs to hear about what I'm doing. And so for you going back into the field, and then not only did you have the letters, the alphabet soup, as you would say, but then you decided to go to be a faculty member.
Right. Well, and even in that space, like I feel like you go, so the research, and it's like you're being molded as a researcher, right?
Yes.
And it's funny because you don't even try it on, because they're like, the researcher, and you're like, oh, me, right? But you start to write and do your dissertation, and maybe even start to really enjoy what you're putting together, and then the fact that you're doing it. But I know my research, I specifically chose to research Black Gen Z, because they were the same students that I've been working with in the university setting that so many universities just missed in terms of engagement. But now here they were going into the workforce post-pandemic. So it just was so unfair, because they're so dismissive of some of the younger generations anyway. They're still recovering from millennials, and they're like, here's Gen Z, but particularly Black Gen Z, because they're a whole vibe in themselves, right? So my research was around, okay, so y'all didn't show up for them in this collegiate space the way you could have, right? Like they had to fight to get to their graduation line, but now they're brilliant and they're in your workspace and they have technology on their side. So how are you guys going to better serve them here? And so being able to come in and say, like, this is who they are. So you need to meet them where they are and let them have agency in that space, because they don't need to just come work for you, because, you know, they're the generations like, I'll be a solopreneur, entrepreneur, I'll do it myself. But the courage and just really like their aptitude and people really not knowing, right? And so getting organizations ready to be places that are Black Gen Z friendly in a sense, because really it's up to them whether or not they want to lend their genius and their innovativeness. So that research and in doing narrative in terms of, qualitative research, but hearing from them. But it was interesting to hear them talk about same thing, like, not wanting to show up in the workspace and feel like they don't have psychological safety, or they don't feel like they belong, which was just what they had come from in the university environment. So I felt like it was my job to kind of expose that and start that conversation. because everybody's about DEI right now and everybody
Mhm.
knows the words, but no two people, mean the same thing when they're talking about diversity, particularly a person of color versus somebody who's not,
Right.
because that's what we experience. And we don't always want to do the heavy lifting in every environment, particularly in the month of February, right? I already did that. I was already the one Black student in my class as an undergrad. Now I'm the only Black person on staff in the workspace. So just trying to figure out how they can equip themselves to go in and have agency in that process. So I would say what did you say about, you were saying about it's your research, right? You can go
Yeah.
back.
You were going back in and you
Mhm.
decided not just to be on the admin side, but also as a faculty. And so
Yeah.
that's where the agency comes in. So because you're talking directly to students as a staff faculty member now about how they can show up for themselves.
Right. And as faculty, I mean, you have a lot of autonomy and, it's your class in a sense. And I felt like, the subject matter is what it is, but also it's like parenting. It's caught, not taught. They do what you do. Right.
Yeah.
So and I'm still, to be honest, like I'm still recognizing the impact that being in this space or being able to have those two initials in front of my name has on younger generations or people that look like you when they walk in the class and they see you and it's like they take a deep breath, like, okay, I'm good, right? Like I'm okay. I'm okay. And then to hear the different stories, like I was in an Uber the other day and it was this younger sister girl and I guess it came up doctor something on my profile. I had pulled it and she was like, "Are you a doctor?" And I was like, "Huh?" I'm like, "Girl, I'm trying to get home from travel. What are you talking?" And I was just like, "Oh, yes." And she was just
I
like,
am.
"Yes, that's me." But she was just like, "Oh my gosh." She's like, "I love when I see Black women just doing things." She's like, "That's an amazing accomplishment." She's like, "I need to go back and finish my master's." And she's like, so she was asking me questions and I was like, so we're going to do this right now. Okay. But just, it's not even about you. Like, you just don't know who's watching. And I felt so inspired by her, like revisiting, like, if she can do it, I can do it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the responsibility that you have. It's that term. I'm going to mess it up, but it's Ubuntu. I am because you are. It's an African like
Proverb.
proverb. Yeah. And that's actually how, even in terms of organization, how they do business in Africa, it's very Ubuntu. Like they're very big about paying it forward, right? And very community and how they do business. But that term Ubuntu is like people have gone before us so that we could do what we do. And so that's our responsibility, is to follow suit. And so I still am just hit over the head sometimes, like, where's the doctor? Oh, that's me. Like I need to get it tattooed on my forehead because this is a respect and a reverence that comes with it that I had no idea, but to be able to stand tall and you're like a survivor.
Yeah. And you said the word I was thinking of, which was responsibility. And so when those students walk in and they're not quite sure who they're going to see, but they're not expecting to see you. And they do see you, and there is a sense of relief that they're safe. Not that you're going to pass them,
Right.
but you're going to give them an experience that they can connect to because they can connect to you. And so how do you take on that responsibility? Because I always tell people, when you get the letters, it automatically comes with responsibility. And sometimes it's a daunting task depending on what you're doing or where you work, because they may not be ready for what you're about to bring to the table. So how do you accept the challenge?
Prayer and crown. No, I'm just kidding. So it is, because it's still very much that feeling, depending on what type of campus you're on. And I'm still in the throes, like I'm seeking a 10-year professorship now and feel like I'm at ground zero in a sense, because that's another space where there's not a lot of representation. And so it's like a repeat of the student body in the universities in terms of student enrollment, how it's broken down. Well, in terms of faculty, there needs to be a certain representation, right? And no matter how much research you do to tell these colleges, these students need people that look like them on campus, in position as staff, as faculty. It's not rocket science, right? So but then it's like you have to go and get the training, right, and then get the degree to then go show up and claim the responsibility for, now I'm going to fight this fight to make sure that there's representation on the faculty side, because there's very much a feeling of, don't get it twisted, like you're a guest,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you do it for the students, and you do it for the visibility of them knowing, like, there's somebody here on this side that cares about me, that wants to see me, finish, or somebody that cares. It's like the movie Higher Learning, and the professor and Malik and their relationship. I mean, he came in and was like, oh, okay, cool. It was a Black professor, but he challenged him more than anyone, particularly in his writing. And he was, and Malik was resistant, right? But they developed this relationship that was just like life-giving to him in terms of all that he experienced later in that movie. But that's our role. Like, we show up and report for duty, but we're the face of maybe the class. But for students of color to see you, it feels like it's like fourfold, right? It's like there's mentorship, there's safety, there's an advocate, there's somebody who's been to places I haven't been, and so I know that they can help me get where I need to go. And so it's really an honor and a privilege. Like, it's a huge responsibility, because you know that you can't get a doctorate and then go hide.
Right.
You can't. Even if you try. I've tried it. Like, because it's like, because they don't prepare you for that part, right? Yeah. It's just like pomps and circumstance, you get hooded, go be great. And then it's a whole nother experience even after that, which is why I'm glad that we have outlets and resources like BDN, but also this podcast, because we don't talk about it enough in those spaces, because there's still not a lot of us. We haven't completely saturated, the terminal degree count. It's still single digit, but there's a whole nother experience that comes with that we have to keep talking about to be able to create community, and then welcome those who are new to it, because it's a different type of battle that no one prepares you for, but you're almost prepared in your undergrad as you're pursuing your degrees or your education, and everybody can relate to it, but we have to talk about it to take the power out of it so we can continue to just persist and push on.
And I love what BDN does, because you're not looking at one particular specialty. Right. Our membership is so diverse, which is what I loved about the first time I encountered them, that I met so many people with so many different types of doctors. I was like, really? I didn't even know some of that existed, but tell me more about it.
Right. Just brilliant,
Yeah, just brilliant. I want to ask you this, because in the work that you do, sometimes visibility, or the amount of visibility, does not equate to value. So let's talk about the work that you are doing currently. You got two things going on here. Busy lady, guys. That's
us, though. We don't know how to sit down.
Yeah, this Black girl magic, it is a real thing.
It is.
So let's talk about ODD Docs. And so with that particular organization, talk to us about what it is and what you guys are desiring to do from that particular vantage point, and then we'll kind of get into Amplified.
Yeah. So OD Docs Inc. became a venture with actually one of my classmates. So one of my running mates in the actual program, and another amazing Black female, Dr. Camille Valentine. We just saw the need after basically the pandemic, how organizations that were really trying to go back to where they were before we had the whole just everybody stay in place, shelter in place, are the ones that are drowning. So change, whether you like it or not, the pandemic had it for you, and you had to just adapt. So organizations really just flailing in terms of what is workplace culture, employee engagement supposed to look like, because a lot of employees showed up post-pandemic and felt like, I've been remote and managing my whole life. So my work-life balance has been better than it ever has. And you want me to come back 8 to 5, like report the way that it was before we started? Absolutely not. So you hear about like the Great Resignation and people just saying, I won't. I'd rather, drive Uber and work at Starbucks, but I need to be able to have a flexible schedule and remote. And so there's kind of there's a tension in people being able to come together and go back to work. And so as organizational psychologists, we established the firm to say, hey, let us help you, almost like a sports agent, right?
Mhm.
Advocate for what these conditions need to be, or, have a conversation or put together some organizational designs that will serve everyone. Because at the end of the day, employees are really the ones who are the stakeholders, but organizations don't always act like it. And then particularly for people of color, a lot happened during the pandemic, right? George Floyd. I mean, it was, just all of a sudden the world had learned this new term of social justice where we're like, catch up, mustard, let's go, right? And
Right.
so organizations saying like, oh, like sign us up for DEI. And it's like, we don't want to send our people into those spaces without knowing that these conditions have been created. And so working with organizations who really are saying, we want to do better and we want to create a culture where people of color feel safe, where they feel appreciated, where they feel like they don't have to do invisible work, where they're valued and it shows. It's not just, oh, we're going to do competency training and we're going to check it off like it's the new FERPA training, but it's in the fiber of the framework of the really like the organizational redesign post pandemic. Because everybody has really had to do that. If you're really wanting to be a workplace where people are happy and engaged, you had to do an element of a makeover or a redesign. So that's where we come in and help apply our expertise in assessing what is needed so that everybody at the end of the day is happy in the space that they're in.
So what is it going to take? Because as you said, we hear DEI forever and a day. Every organization has a DEI person, whether it's really the human resources person or it's just somebody who just took on the title, but they're really not doing the work. What is it going to take for people to really get it and then really integrate DEI into their organizations? And again, I say this all the time. DEI is just not black and white anymore.
No.
People identify in so many different ways that if it's just black female, it's not enough because she identifies with other cultures as well. So what do they have to do to like make it stick, make it work, and get people to be committed to these organizations the way they were before the pandemic?
Listen. They have to really listen, because you're not going to understand what it's like to walk in somebody's shoes that is a different color, different sexual orientation, difference, but being able to really listen to people when they say, this is my experience in the space that I'm in, and accept the difference versus feel threatened by it, so that by listening, you can feel like they're really there because they want to do the work. Because as soon as race comes up, right, because no two people mean the same thing when they even speak of diversity, like you said, it's geographical, it's so many different things. So we have to clarify, what are we even talking about?
Right.
People have to begin to talk to each other and listen versus, defend or, be judgmental, but come from a space of listening and learning, because that's the only way you're really going to develop an appreciation from somebody who is different than you. You don't have to, you don't have to argue whose experience is worse or different, but just accept it. And I think the difference in the organizations that are actually really doing the work are listening, just like in the collegiate setting when you're programming for students, but nobody asks the students what they want.
Yeah. So
listen to what your employees are wanting or saying, particularly people of color, versus be dismissive. Well, no, are you sure? Like microaggressions. Okay, like that's just, the world is just now caught up. So now they have all these words and these names and these terms to call out what we've been experiencing all along. Yeah. But it's like racial battle fatigue. Like, I'm tired. Do I have to speak for all Black women because I want to wear my hair a certain way today? No. Like, and other people understanding, like, that's just, we have to create safe spaces so that people can show up as their whole self and feel like they're safe enough to talk about their experience versus being judged. So just listen and learn.
And that's the thing. You just said that they have to feel safe. So in order to listen, people have to start speaking. And there's been a lot of times that in organizations, Black people are the last people to say anything. They just want to go to work. They keep their mouth closed. If anybody's speaking up because they're unhappy, Karen saying, listen, I am not happy. You took the break room away. Lakeisha is taking all the, it's just always a complaint. And Lakeisha saying, listen, I'm happy. I'm good. just leave me alone. How do we get people to speak up and be bold, even if there are going to be some negative repercussions?
Safety. And they have to feel like people, like they're valued and what they're saying is valued, right? Versus, because you get desensitized, like, I have something to say, but I'm not going to say it because it's not going anywhere.
Right.
They have to see it. It has to be something that they're intentional about, that they know when they speak, somebody values what they're saying and are going to put it into action. So, you know, we spend so much time in the workspace, or now even in remote, and the least that could happen is that we feel like the work that we're doing matters, and the people that value the work that we're doing value us too. And so that changes the dynamic a lot when you feel like somebody's actually listening on the other side.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have agency too. I mean, it's like, since George Floyd, there's like Pepsi had this this initiative, like, we're going to hire this many Black execs so there's a better representation. Well, who's holding them accountable? Because organizations need to be held accountable, and that's the thing. Just like universities need to be held accountable, because at the end of the day, they're still a business, and some of these universities are putting out Teslas with 2 wheels, and nobody's saying nothing.
Yes,
we shouldn't still be having graduation and retention issues, or lack of engagement for Black students in 2023.
Yeah.
And when they know, so the accountability piece too, and people being able to say, okay, well, I'll take my talents and my genius elsewhere, and not being afraid to do so. I mean, the average tenure now in staying a job is like a little under 2 years. And then with Gen Z, absolutely not. They're looking for another job while you're telling them what they're not going to do.
Right.
So it's a conversation and a negotiation, which never really existed before. I mean, anybody that asked for remote work before the pandemic, it was always no, because you won't be productive. Well, people have proven that to be completely wrong. So why do we need to go back to this indoctrinated, you need to be in a seat from 8 to 5? I mean, it's just, it's a different day.
Control. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in order for these organizations to do the things that you're talking about in terms of shifting and pivoting, it starts with the leaders. We have to have a leader that's willing to listen, to understand what needs to happen to make the needed changes, to make employees be high functioning and perform at their highest level. And so we're going to shift now to talk about Amplified, because that's kind of what we're doing.
Yes.
So let's talk about Amplified and what you're doing there with these leaders, with these teams, and those people that really want to be high functioning.
Yes. So Amplified Strengths literally was birthed out of becoming a certified Clifton Strengths Coach, which I was exposed to in my master's program. And it's a common language that I used in the university setting, particularly with students of color, to help them know how to show up and have a language to speak about what they do well, which was really uncomfortable for them because they're trying to stay under the radar, right? But to show up and say, hey, I have these strengths, and there's 5 of them, and there's these words that are associated, and let me tell you about them, and let me tell you about me. It was a very gratifying experience because it's an asset-based language where there's a huge deficit, right? That a lot of us are coming from being first gen and then being students of color, that we feel like we have to work up this mountain that's never gonna end. And so utilizing it there and seeing, them engage in their spaces. And when someone says, who are you? They had this whole, they've been equipped with this whole language to speak to that. So as a result, organizations are run by leaders, but you may love your job, but you'll leave a job like management. Well, you'll leave if the management is not what you need it to be, no matter how much you love your job.
Yep.
So equipping college students with this language so that when they show up in those interviews, they can talk about their strengths, or they can talk about, this is what I bring, this is the value that I add. They can say it with their chest and even walk a little bit taller. So I decided to create it as a consulting venture to be able to go into organizations even and utilize strengths as a language that can help with workplace culture, dynamics, like just really understanding one another. These people that you look to your left and right and see every day, but you don't really know who they are and how they show up. Because when else do we really talk about it? But self-awareness is a must-have. You can't claim leadership and not know who you are. Yeah. And then you're going to be putting the, caring for other people. You have to know who you are before you can have appreciation for someone else's. So strengths is a language that I utilize in organizational space initially to kind of start, let's develop appreciation for one another and allow people to show up and feel comfortable and safe to talk about their strengths. And then as a team, appreciation of the strengths with the people that you work with allows you to become a high performing team, because the cohesion, right? Like, we got it. And you can tell, I mean, there's a ton of organizations who want to be on that 100 great places to work list.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a criteria that they go through to be able to pride themselves in that. And a lot of that is just being very intentional about the development of, leadership and, whose care you're putting in leadership, particularly now because people are burnt out and post-pandemic. It's like, can we just stop and talk about what all that was about?
Yeah.
Right. And so being able to have those conversations about how people show up, because we bring it to the workforce and the workspace just by being human beings and showing up to engage with others. So,
and I love that you also collaborate, not just in higher ed, but, K-12 settings as well. And you said that, initially that when you went to undergrad, you were like, oh, okay, well, what is this Scantron thing you speak of? Mm-hmm. And there's no reason why students in the K-12 setting are not fully being prepared for post-secondary education.
Yes. Well, and it's funny you say that. That's perfect, because there's a short movie, I think Michael B. Jordan and Oprah did. It's a short film. It's called These Hands. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't seen it.
So this whole lack of, there's not enough of us in STEM. There's not enough of us in the terminal degrees registered, right? But a lot of that stems in K-12, like this prison pipeline. Like there's so much work to be done, and it starts in K-12 in a sense, because they're tapping, our little Black boys on the shoulder in the 5th grade and saying basketball or football, not chemistry or biology, right? And so even reading and writing, if they could glorify reading and writing in the way that they do sports or even celebrity, like, did you know Cardi B is a really good writer?
Right.
They might respond different, right? But we as a people, that's why it's so important for us to go and get these degrees, to get that training, to get in these rooms, to get these resources, to go back and help like relay this foundation, because we need a whole do-over in being able to raise up and equip younger in making writing a safe. And that's the other thing is most of us, I can remember, I don't want anybody to read my paper. Like, I'm ashamed. Don't make me to read out loud or to read. What if I don't if I don't enunciate it right? There's so much shame associated with academics. Right. And so we have to change that dynamic so that more people will feel safe in their endeavors and their own learning, but earlier in equipping them so that they can show up in post-secondary, feeling like they're equipped, whether they're first generation or not, but that it's a warm transfer versus a re-traumatizing, experience, because they have every right to be there.
We just got a long way to go in that particular setting. I think we have to understand K-12 was not designed for Black students. And so it is still very rigid in the way that it's supposed to look. The level of cultural sensitivity and awareness and opportunities in terms of expression and creativity does not sit well for students of color. It is targeted for students that don't look like ourselves. And so that's a whole nother conversation. But because you're doing that work, you're creating space to say, listen, let's talk about what your students need. Because if you've got a 99% population Black and impoverished, what you're providing for them in terms of learning opportunities is not going to work. And you may graduate them with no accountability, just say that, and get them on to college. But the likelihood of them graduating with that degree, they're not prepared.
Right. And even if they're an athlete, that's hard. There's 2 jobs, and there's a ton of them that don't finish. So we need to go back for them and get them finished, like whoever that is. But so These Hands, people can YouTube it, but it's just powerful because it's a dad and his son passing the football on a football field, and like all these coaches, a lot of them are white, are like, hey, keep it up, like he has a future. And so he proceeds to tell his son, like, you have no idea what you can do with these hands. So they start to they go into like their surgeons on the football field and all these different, they could be an astronaut. Like there's more than just sports, right? And imagine what you could do with these hands, but we have to start having that conversation with them much younger.
And that's what you're doing. You're letting people know all the talent that you have in these organizations if you just become aware of all the gifts you have in front of you, and then utilize those gifts for their good individually, to be proud of what they bring to the table, but
Right.
also to consider how they can support and help the organization.
Yeah, it's time for us to show up and show out.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
my job, is to help y'all get equipped and, so you can go show up and show out and
Yeah.
unapologetically, which we do in so many other spaces, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no time to be timid now.
Yeah. Well, they know us to show out anyway, right? So why not just show up and show out?
Right.
We show out well, so let's just do
We
both.
do. We absolutely do. We do. Yes, I agree.
So what do you want your legacy to be? So in the next 5 to 10 years, what do you want people to be saying about Dr. Renee Cromer?
It sounds crazy, but I feel like I'm a part of like this Underground Railroad contemporary movement in a sense. It's like, I know what they said, but we got you, right? Like if I could create just, a resource that is kind of like a hub where people know, like, oh, this is where you go to learn about your strengths, or this is where you go to get trained in knowing how to advocate and communicate your value, so that it's just like we take the world by storm in the workplace, in the colleges, but we have to be intentional and create the space and allocate the resources to make sure that our young people have everything that they need. It's a different day, and they need people around them who are going to speak that life and opportunity into them. And so there has to be like 3 times as many of us to be able to go in that space. So I feel like the legacy is to do what, our ancestors and people that have come before us to do. They cleared the path so that we could even show up in a space. So we have more clearing to do. So I really feel like my legacy is to clear space and get access to as many resources and conversations and places and organizations, and get them ready for us to be able to come in and feel like we know our value and worth, and know how to articulate and negotiate that. Because life is short. Like, we need to be able to, enjoy every day that we show up and be appreciated for it, and know when you're experiencing less, that you have a choice, and that you can make your expectation and needs known, even in the workplace, without, retaliatory, responses. Because it's like a movement, just like with social justice, right? Like with Black Lives Matter, like after a while, this is a whole movement. And so here we are yet again, claiming agency in the workspace and saying, no, this is I know what my rights are. Like, I have a right to feel safe. I have a right to know that I'm valued and I'm a human being and I perform. And I also need to, be compensated. So.
Yeah, I feel like, you remember maybe 10, 15 years ago, and even now you hear people say, it's just unfortunate that even in 2022, Black people are still being the first. Well, I want to twist that and say, you know what? Get ready to be the first. It's time for you to be the first, and take ownership and be proud that I am the first to do this, the first to hold that position, the first to require this amount of money to do this type of work, because we deserve it.
And we always are the first. It reminds me of Woman King. Like, I feel like it's like a tribal, like we're all in this tribe, like training for battle, and battle looks different for everyone. Like the battle might be that you're the only person of color on faculty, and you feel like it every time you step foot on campus, right? But you're the warrior, and it's battle. Or you're in you're on a committee who's addressing like academic disqualification, and you're trying to advocate for somebody's son. But it's a battle. But it's a battle. But just like in real battle, you have to be prepared, and that's essentially what I feel like, getting a doctorate or continuing your education is part of that training, like the weaponry, right, of it. But it's a battle. And then we also have to take care of each other because it's a battle.
Yeah.
When we get tired, or we just feel like, oh, I'm tired, it was a battle today, but being able to continue to equip one another and join forces, because we are the first. Like, we're just an inaugural nation, and we're always doing the first, right? And that's just what we do. We're wired for it, but it's not easy.
You're going to have me walking into all these different settings that I go in. and I'm going to hear tribal drums in my head. Hoomba, hoomba,
Yes.
hoomba,
Yes.
hoomba. And I'm like, my name is Christopher Holmes. They go like, what is wrong with him? I'm like, I'm empowered.
It's the truth. Every Monday, it's a battle. So you got to show up for it.
Well, I was able to get to know you and meet you in person at the last conference. So I want you to talk about your experience with BDN and then also your experience at the conference.
It was amazing. I don't even know. It's funny because I run into people like, how did you hear about BDN? I felt like it was like my reward for going through this, battle, trying to get this degree. And then it was like somebody whispered BDN, and I was like, okay, bet. And, Googled them, and I was like, what? It's like, it's a bunch of us.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. It was an amazing experience to be around so much talent. And everybody, like you said, like interdisciplinary, like the conversations just about what people are doing and their research. And it was a very healing space too, because to be able to have conversations about, what you had just come through in terms of dissertating and defending. And we all had these war stories in the forums and whatnot. We're able to lay it down and really just feel like you got some healing, from like one of Mary J's songs is like the healing is in each other. It definitely was that, and the network, I felt like I was at like a Black Disneyland as an adult. It's like, because at Disneyland, they are everywhere you go, they tell you, have a magical day, have a magical day. I was having a magical day. I just was inundated with I was in awe of the people that were around me and what they were doing in their spaces, and the change that they're really trying to evoke. And I just felt like it was this secret. Like, how could people not know about this, right? And I guarantee, like every colleagues, like BDN, no. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, girl, they sell the TVs for 25 cents at Walmart. Like, come on. Like, how can you not know about this? But it was really a defining moment because I actually got to present on my dissertation the way I wanted to, because, when you're going through that process, it's like, you just feel like you're the yes man, like, okay, whatever, I want to be done. And so whatever your chair, whoever is saying, you just do it just to get it done. But I felt like I got to retell it the way that I wanted it to be known. And so that it was really, I came full circle. And then also just, even being able to be on this podcast with you and feel like, you really have something to say.
Yeah.
And we all have these testimonies really, that we need to be more vocal and like say with our chest, right? Because somebody's going to benefit from it. And I'll never forget a conversation I had at the conference where it was a Clark Atlanta grad student who was like majoring in like biochemistry, or like, I'm just in awe, right? And she came up to me after one of the forums, which was about like postdoc life, right? Because again, I don't have any answers. I'm trying to figure it out just like as I'm going to. And there's this misconception too that, sometimes like we have it all figured out, but it's okay to say like, I don't, and so in that forum, we were able to talk about some of those things, but she came up to me after and she just was like, thank you for talking about like the struggle, right? Because when I swear, as soon as you decide you're going to go back to school and it seems like a good time, it's like somebody hears that and then everything, like it's like an emotional tsunami, like your whole world falls apart as soon as you start to do this doctorate. And it's like, wait, what? And a lot of people have to share, like you lose loved ones and it was during the pandemic, or just, it's a fight. But she just came up to me and had like tears in her eyes and was just grateful. Like, thank you so much for being honest. And cause she was suffering and feeling like I'm the only one, that feels like this is not fun. This is hard. Like, what do you do with that? Cause you feel like you have to put your game face on and, we wear a lot of masks. You can't go tell your chair, I don't want to write today. Or your professor, you feel like you have to perform. So it's just like, it was the synchronicity of I'm in the right place at the right time with the people that I need to be with. And I came back to California, not the same.
Yeah.
So I already had a black fist tattooed on the back of my ear, but I feel like I got a little bigger because it's just like, we have something to say and we need to say it like, in the way that it needs to be said. And it was interesting in our it was interesting to not be the minority in a space too. That was powerful.
Yes. And I think the power of it is there's something that you have to say and it needs to be said, but not just in this space. And so when you leave there, you're saying, I'm going to say it to the whole world, not just to my people, but to everybody.
Just like I said in Atlanta, Georgia at the BDN conference. I'm going to say it like I said it there, like versus, you know, in a way that is more comfortable for you to hear. No, you want to talk about DEI, or they call it, I put a J in front. Now they call it Jedi. They put the justice in front. I'm like, okay, but we need to, let's have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I am glad that you were there. I'm glad you had a great experience. I'm glad that you're a member of BDN, and I'm looking forward to all of the great work that you're going to do through both of your organizations, because it's definitely needed. It's necessary. Keep being bold, keep being a bad sister, keep speaking your mind, and keep pumping that fist, and then keep those beats drumming in your head too as you walk through the door, like I'm going to be doing, just because you mentioned Woman King, and I'm like, what? Why am I bouncing? What's going on?
There were drums at the conference now. Remember? We can't, I mean, it's a part of who we are and our culture. So you might as well show up with your channel your inner drums when you're in that faculty meeting.
I love it. So, thank you for joining me today. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being so honest and transparent. But I do want people to know where they can go to learn more about you if they want to reach out after this conversation is over. So if you don't mind, share where they can go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing.
So right now it would be Instagram. So at Amplified Strengths, or at OD Docs Inc. And LinkedIn, where our websites are currently being revamped. But yeah, pretty much Instagram or LinkedIn, or Google me. And I would be happy to respond to whatever contact information is on there.
There you guys go. You have it. You have the information. Now go be empowered and do something about it. And while you're checking out Dr. Cromer over there, check out the Black Doctoral Network as well. We would love to connect with you and share with you on all of our social media channels. We have so many great things going on with BDN. So all you got to do is just click the button and get connected, and we'll be right there for you. Well, until next time, guys, be safe. Be blessed. I'm going to come back again with another amazing guest. Yes, Dr. Cromer is amazing, but there's so many more amazing members that we have that we just must share with you. But until then, be safe, guys. Peace out. We love you, and I'll see you next time.